Welcome to this edition of Jailcast. Today is Monday, March 10th. With me today is Sean Turzanski. Now, normally we interview people that are actually in jail, but Sean has recently been released on bail, and he has an important story that we want to get out to the public. So thank you, Sean, for joining us today. I have posted in the video notes a copy of a letter, and this is a letter that Sean wrote from Burlington County Jail in Mount Holly, New Jersey. This is a first-hand account of what I really have no other way of describing but as a torture and murder and cover-up that took place in solitary confinement in Burlington County Jail. This letter is incredible. People that have read it find it highly credible and absolutely heartbreaking. The death of Robert Taylor under these barbaric conditions is something that everyone needs to learn about. So, Sean, thank you for joining us. Do me a favor, just kind of give me an overview of what you experienced in solitary confinement in Burlington County Jail.
Absolutely, Mr. Babb. First and foremost, thank you for having me on your show. Thanks to the followers and thanks to all of the supporters thus far. Without you guys, the message wouldn't have been possible. So keep up the good fight. Once again, my name is Sean Turzanski, and I was incarcerated at Burlington County Detention Center from December 9th, 2013 until March 5th, 2014. I was placed in segregation on the 24th, Christmas Eve, for actually defending myself in a 2-against-1 fight, as I stated in my letter. While back there, I witnessed the demise, torture, neglect, which ultimately led to the death of Mr. Robert Taylor. I kept adequate notes throughout. I had a feeling something terrible was going to happen. Like you said, it's an unfortunate circumstance, but I'm very thankful that I was there to witness this and bring light to the public's eyes.
So what exactly did you witness? I know you, from your letter, you give some details, but maybe you could just sort of walk us through some of the main points. Well,
segregation is a unit back there which they deem for those who cannot function properly in population, or you're given a charge within the jail. Basically, you violate a code of conduct, fighting, is pretty much the main charge back there. There's a lot of violent offenders. It's a series of 5 cells 201 to 205. The room's approximately 35 by 20, each cell being about 7 feet wide. So that's a pretty accurate estimation as far as the layout goes. Mr. Taylor came back on the 26th. He was weak. He was accompanied by 2 guards, 1 on each side. He was basically shuffling. I could see he was about the age of my grandfather. You know, actually my grandfather passed at 72, so was pretty much along those age. They were shuffling him in, and he entered cell 203. I immediately began questioning what he had done to be deemed worthy of being put in segregation. I was then told by several COs that he actually did nothing wrong at all. They just didn't want to tie up a correctional officer in the clinic to watch Taylor where he actually should have been put. So I found that awfully odd and just downright wrong.
Now, was he suffering from, I believe you said alcohol detox? Is that why he needed medical attention?
That is correct. Yeah, it was coming from alcohol withdrawal. He was basically a local, I hate to use the word, but a town drunk, I guess you would say, was in and out of the system for petty charges, and often sought refuge in the county jail, especially during wintertime, to get out of the harsh conditions that the homeless often face. And, you know, ultimately, sad to say, the refuge he sought is what ultimately killed him. So they brought him back, open cell 203, which had just been freshly mopped from an inmate who left, I don't know, less than 20 minutes prior to Taylor. Upon walking into the cell, I thought he was thrown down. He actually walked in, slipped on the wet floor, hit the ground relatively hard, which left a laceration in his arm, which was later told to me by another CO. And that's where he remained for the duration of his stay, on the concrete floor, cold, barren, and alone. Over the next 5 days, like I said, my senses were limited. I didn't have a direct view into Taylor's cell at all given times. He was 2 down from me, so that'd be approximately 14 feet. But I could see our cell doors are 2-paneled. They have windows, almost like a front door would be. So I could see on an angle his tray slot, which would flap down, and that's where you would place your meals. As I documented, over 5 days, he never ate any of his meals. His cell door remained shut for the majority of his stay, except for when they would, open it up to release aerosol into the air to, diffuse the smell. The interaction between him and the guards in a, positive manner was non-existent. They basically just left him in there to rot. I mean, his meals were placed on the tray and then discarded directly into the trash. The nursing staff would come in 3 times a day to administer medication to those within segregation, walk by his cell, say, "Mr. Taylor, would you like your medication?" No response, and they would just keep it moving. On the 5th day, December 30th, Mr. Taylor was found dead.
Now, how many meals were you able to determine were delivered but not eaten?
I had a total of 15, which I actually have my journal right here in front of me. I had another more detailed journal, but the COs actually entered my cell and ripped up my journal, my paperwork, my envelopes, and a lot of that stuff. But that was further down the road after the retribution came back. I'm looking right here as of, I have a little thing here. I had 12 meals as of the 25th. No, I'm sorry, as of the 29th, and then the last 3 would have been on the 30th. So that would have been a total of 15 meals, 3 a day. Even my note here, I had Mr. Taylor, cell 203, verge of death, neglect. And I had written that on the 28th of December.
So now, presumably, if he's not even getting up off the ground, he's getting not only no food, but no water for days. And
That's correct.
He probably expired from dehydration, perhaps, was what, or exposure or starvation. What an incredibly cruel punishment for somebody that really hadn't committed any substantial crime of any kind. I mean, this is a slow, tortured death. This is almost arguably worse than the murder of Kelly Thomas, who was beaten to death by police, and and is famous for it. This was a slow, agonizing death over days for this poor man. It's heartbreaking. Now, you had tried to get the word of this story out, and you were met with some obstacles. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. Upon the death of Mr. Robert Taylor on the 30th, they immediately took me out of segregation. The paramedics arrived along with local law enforcement. I then began verbally stating that they left him in there to rot, 5 days, direct neglect. They were murderers. I was kicking my cell door. There was now a pool of about 10 COs outside in the main segregation area telling me to shut up. They were going to come in and break my jaw. I better be quiet. The paramedics did look in my direction. The law enforcement looked in my direction. And then my cell door opened, and they escorted me out of there to a different area of the jail where I was held for the next 3 days until segregation was, I guess, cleared and the crime scene was taken down. Spent another 3 nights there. Actually, I was placed back in Robert Taylor's cell, which was horrific. I was told the toilet in the other cell was not working, and that's where they're going to keep me. The smell was unbearable. I was told to basically, clean it up. Here's some Lysol. You spray it down. We have nowhere else to put you. So I spent the remainder of my 3 days there. Went back to population. I was on D wing. Began writing a little bit myself in regards to what I witnessed. Was handing that out to inmates. I did not put my name on it at that point, just for fear of retaliation from the guards. one of the days I walked down in the morning prior to inspection, I actually saw Ed Fortune, otherwise known as NJ Weedman, a political activist and pro-marijuana, I guess you want to say pro-marijuana party. Over the past couple of years, he's pretty well known. So I showed a copy of my letter to Ed. He was pretty taken back and astounded by what I witnessed and wrote. He began helping me get a couple letters out to local media sources, to paper and stuff, but we never heard anything back. You know, like Ed mentions in the YouTube video, Death for a $96 Ticket. We don't know if they're tampering with our mail. You don't know what's coming in or out. There are a few good COs in there, but the majority of them, in my opinion, were not good. You know, they could have stepped up and done something about this, but they chose to, you know, turn a blind eye and not. So Ed was actually leaving on the 28th, at which point in time I was gearing up for the letter which you see before you, the full 6 pages. I wrote that 2 days prior to Ed leaving. Gave him my only copy, which, you know, I trusted in good faith he was going to get out there, and he did. I mean, I thank Ed Fortune to this day. Without him, you know, his strength, fortitude, and honesty, the message probably wouldn't have been conveyed, especially in this fashion. So thank you, Ed Fortune. That being said, Ed released it on Facebook, I believe, the 28th. And a day later, the 29th, I was in recreation, back in population, keep in mind, and I was greeted, not with open arms, by the warden, who came in to basically start a fight with me. He entered, you know, the recreation area, which I'd never seen him up until this point, keep in mind. He was basically a name, a myth. He never came out of his office. I'd never seen him walking around, and here he is in the recreation area. He took it upon himself to look in my direction, motion. I walked over, formally introduced myself, and that's when he started a full barrage of, you know, telling me I better keep my effing mouth shut. Do you know what you're saying? This is jail. You can't just go around saying these things. And I, you know, calmly explained to him that I wasn't saying things. I was merely stating facts and advocating on Robert Taylor's behalf, you know, since he no longer had a voice, and, you know, he should be ashamed of what happened under his command, because this was murder.
Now, was this Lawrence Artis? Is that his name?
That is correct,
okay.
Yes.
All right, so he comes out of his little bureaucrat's office to basically to intimidate you, or to try to actually maybe actually start a physical confrontation that could get you deeper into the system?
I actually think that was his goal. He had looked at my charges, I guess, prior to the fact, saw that I was in a fight. I'm not one to frequent the system. I got jammed up in a little bit of a situation, which is embarrassing due to my lifestyle. But that being said, I'm pretty level-headed overall, and I knew that was his tactic, to try and antagonize me, you know, so I would take a preemptive strike against him. Thankfully, I did not. I kept my composure, and, you know, he tried to get the best of me, but I don't feel he did. At no point in time I raised my voice. Like I said, I stated the facts. One CO remained next to him, and then all of a sudden he called a code, and a code is a term that they use for basically immediate assistance that would be used in a riot, an outrageous fight where they need backup, and then all the available COs in the jail run to wherever the code is called. And Lawrence Artis actually called a code for our conversation, in which he got flustered, he cursed at me, and he threatened me. So he did all of this, and then he called a code.
I mean, am I paranoid, or was he hoping to maybe start a fight where you would have been killed?
You know, I hate to say it, but that's kind of what I thought after the fact. I thought, you know, thank goodness I took a step back. Thank goodness there was other inmates there. Thank goodness, you know, I knew when to walk away, because he was really raising his voice at me and yelling at me. Like I said, the profanity streaming out of his mouth, and at that point in time, I just walked away.
Unbelievable. Well, I should say it is believable, but still shocking. So now you've released this information, thanks to Ed Fortune. It's out there. They approach you. Now, what type of investigation is going on at this point? Now, my understanding is that the Burlington County coroner had declared this a death of natural causes. Is that correct?
That is correct. I was actually interviewed by the prosecutor's office on January 16th. They brought me down. They had a copy of a letter which I had sent them in regards to what I witnessed. They called me over. I was there for about, 15, 20 minutes. It was very brief. Their questions were brief. They were questioning my credibility. I mean, these are the same people who are trying to put me behind bars, for the crime which I committed. So therefore, they're not taking all this too seriously. I also asked to speak with Internal Affairs. I was told Internal Affairs no longer existed. It had been disbanded a week or two prior to this happening, which was very convenient on their end. And the system of measures within was just not there. So it was basically chalked up as, a jailhouse letter. I had something against them. What I witnessed was, merely made up. I'm sure this stuff happens often within the system, but I had nothing to gain out of this. I mean, my charges were petty. I wasn't going to spend time in jail. I wasn't looking at any sort of serious crime. So for me to come out with this information, like I said, I had nothing to gain. I was merely trying to do what was right. It was completely unjust what happened. This man was murdered, as you said, and those within have to be held accountable. So I was willing to go to any measure to make sure, that was done. So
now, is there currently any type of criminal investigation going on?
At this point in time, I know the FBI has a copy of my letter, the one which we're discussing now, which initially went out to Ed Fortune. He was called and he had to go up to the Capitol to release that to them. I believe now Robert Bernardi actually contacted J. Edgar saying the investigation was closed. I had a copy of that email. And then a day later, he had sent an email to someone else saying there was an ongoing investigation. So he kind of contradicted himself within that period of time, which, based on his past, he contradicts himself quite often. So whether it's open or closed at this point, I'm really not sure.
Well, in the show notes, I'm going to post some links of phone numbers that people can call to demand some accountability on this.
Outstanding. Yeah, I actually received a pretty strong email earlier from Georgina Shanley. She's actually a local Amnesty International advocate, and she CC'd me on something from a Mr. Bill Wolf. I don't know if you're familiar with Mr. Wolf. But he had written something to the Freeholders today demanding answers, demanding, an investigation,
Well, I think the best we can do is to, keep light on this because as I've been told by a former guard, this is not the first death. In fact, there's been another death under questionable circumstances in the jail since this event.
That is correct. Yeah. And it's a shame to say, I'm not going to release his name at this time, but I was actually, pretty good friends. Well, within he was a friend of the second gentleman who passed. He was only 49 or 50 years old. He was actually back in segregation during the demise and decline of Robert Taylor. He was a key witness. He left one day prior to Taylor actually passing. So it seems all too coincident, that, he just died in there as well on the 24th of February, as I was told by COs. He was in there. He was given a pacemaker. And then upon coming back to jail, he was never taken any post-surgery follow-ups. He wasn't given his medication. He should have been on the medical wing. They actually had him back on the max wing, F wing, which is full of gang members, young thugs, hoodlums, and he should have never been there. His stress level was too high. On March 4th, I was actually going to court, and I was in the holding tank, and his cellmate came up to me, and he knew who I was just because word had spread at the jail at that point. Keep in mind I was in segregation, but he knew I was in the holding tank, and he wanted to speak to me confidentially. And he doesn't want his name known, but he told me the whole story in regards to what happened to this gentleman. And it was equally bad, if not worse, than what happened to Robert Taylor.
Shocking. And a person I spoke to who was a former guard for over 10 years at this jail says, when I asked him about your letter, he said that's absolutely credible. He says there have been multiple deaths. This is nothing new. This is what they do over there. And that's why I feel that we have to pile onto this and hold these people accountable, because it will continue until people make it stop. And right now, I mean, I feel that we have this, I call it the culture of incarceration, where people can be thrown into that jail at a moment's notice. In fact, I'm aware of a man, Fernando Salguero, who was put into there for a day for having what they said was a 12-year-old unpaid traffic ticket. They actually strip searched him and put him in there for the day.
Wow.
These people are animals, and if I'm sure people on the outside might think, well, they're criminals. It's not supposed to be nice. They have no idea what's going on in there, and they have no idea how minor the infractions are that can land you in that situation. Victimless crimes or just small crimes, unpaid tickets, stupid probation violations. It's so easy to end up there, and to be subjected to these barbaric conditions. I mean, it's like the Dark Ages or something in there.
Yeah, that's what you said. I said, is this the medieval times? Where are we? I mean, this is not a third world country. We are the United States of America. And as you touched upon, some of these crimes are so petty. And a lot of them are actually crimes of necessity, not justifying, but like I said, they were seeking refuge, they're homeless, they're mentally ill. Jail is actually a safe haven for a lot of people who don't, have the means on the street. And you go in there and you find something completely different. I've never been to prison. Like I said, this was first encounter for myself. But that being said, you think the county jail system, innocent until proven guilty, would protect you. You think they would have resources for you. That is not the case whatsoever. It's a different world in there, and it's a struggle. And for those who can't protect themselves and don't have a voice, they're often taken advantage of, and it's sad.
Well, and I think that's why, we need to thank you. It just goes to show that an inmate in that jail has incredible integrity compared to the people that are running it. That you put yourself in personal danger to stand up for a man that you didn't know, that died tragically, that maybe has no one else to stand up for him. And you said, you know what, I'm going to put myself at risk. I'm going to tell this story because somebody has to do it, regardless of the consequences. And I consider that to be absolutely heroic. So,
well, I deeply appreciate that, Mr. Babb. I've often, as I said, my lifestyle has not been, the most righteous over the past couple years after the decline of my business. I've second-guessed a lot of choices I've made, over the past couple years. But this is something I don't second-guess. I don't, question myself why I did it. It just had to be done. You know what I mean? It's 110% accurate, truthful. Like I said, I have nothing to gain for this except that justice is served. I demand an immediate, investigation. Someone has to come forth here and speak. Those who are staying silent, from the Freeholders office, basically condones these crimes. They need to come out and start delivering answers, publicly.
Well, and I think we can safely bet that the staff of Burlington County Jail is going to be listening to this. And the first thing I'm going to let them know is, you know what, if you remain silent, you're part of the cover-up to murder and torture. The right thing to do, if there are good people in that institution, and I'm told there are, the good people need to stand up and separate themselves from the murderers and make a clear distinction what side you're on. because to remain silent and complacent is to be an accomplice to murder. Okay? People think, well, I want to keep my job. You're not going to keep your job if you go to jail for murder.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, even when I was placed up on segregation, when everything had came out to the limelight and the public, there was probably, I'd say, a good 5 or 6 COs who, throughout the course of, my remaining time there would come up to me, would give me anonymous tips in regards to what was going on, would tell me to keep up the good fight, stay vigilant, that they did the old man wrong, they would say. They really did him dirty, was what one CO told me. Keep up the good fight, keep your head up, you'll get these guys. And that was coming from COs within.
Well, they need to come forward and speak to the authorities. Because
there was really a separation of divide in there. You could see there was the pro-Artis campaign, those who rode his coattails, and I guess were looking for raises or a rise in the ranks. And then there was those who kind of fell in the middle. They were indifferent, just took it as a job. And then there were those who were really against him for their mistreatment to Robert Taylor, how they wrongfully put me in segregation. Several COs couldn't believe that he even put me back there for that. He was completely wrong. Actually, the CO that wrote me up for the charge was conduct which disrupts is what he charged me for. He picked a fight with me, but yet conduct which disrupts. That's what he sent me back to segregation for. And he said, look, I'm sorry. I had to write you up. I had no other choice. The warden said, you have to go to segregation.
Well, of course he had a choice.
Right,
I think that's a load of crap to say he had to do it. Nobody had to do it. Nobody has to participate in this crime. And the people that are choosing to do it, whether they think they're good people or not, they are accomplices to murder, and they need to come forward, or they're going to have to answer for their crime one way or another.
Absolutely.
So let's hope that this message gets out wide, loud and clear to those people. What's next for you? What do you have coming up, or is there anything you're going to continue to do to bring attention to this? I know you're getting a lot of media inquiries, but what is your plan?
So far thus far, my email has been filled on a daily basis. Actually, since the Trentonian came out with it today, Penny Ray really did a fantastic job with that article. We have to give him 2 thumbs up on that. Thank you, Penny Ray. Several publications prior, didn't convey it in the proper message at all. They basically, were slighted towards the prosecutor's office. If you look at what Jim Walsh wrote with the Courier Post, was complete disgrace. I mean, his wording, his context. He quoted Georgina Shanley from Amnesty International. One quote that really wasn't even relative. It was 2 different stories within. I was really upset upon reading that. I actually called Jim, and Jim tried to blame Georgina for the direction of the article, which wasn't the case at all. Jim just didn't have the backbone to really come forth and press it, in regards to the proper direction. But I'm going to stay vigilant. I'm going to, talk to the media. If anyone out there wishes to speak with me, please contact me directly. I'm not giving up the good fight. I'm staying vigilant. I ask all of you to please do so as well. And I'm actually seeking assault private counsel in regards to civil matters against the jail for the way I was treated, within.
That's great. Is it okay if I post your email in the show notes?
Oh, please do so.
Okay. And if people can help, I'm sure you could use a little help with that, with some lawyer fees and, protecting yourself and doing what you have to do to hold them accountable for just what they did to you. I want to see you prevail in that matter.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I want to add, when I was placed back in segregation the last time, merely for the conduct which disrupts, I was in cell 201 with another inmate. Several guards would tell me to watch my back. You can't just go around here writing things. Where do you think you are? This is jail. They would say, you have no rights. That's what the one captain told me. I have no rights. This is jail. I then asked him for a grievance form. He asked what my grievance was. I apparently had to tell him what my grievance was. He would deem whether it was worthy or not to get a grievance form. I mean, that's the kind of, system these guys were working here. But
no accountability. No accountability.
None whatsoever, and it's sad because most of the other inmates in there would just nod their head and walk away. Not me. I'm demanding answers, and I did so within. But I was back there in segregation in cell 201 with another inmate, and I was told to watch my back. And then one day they put another inmate in my cell who was already back in segregation. So he shifted from his cell to my cell in segregation. I was laying on my mattress doing a little bit of meditation, and all of a sudden he pounced on me and started physically assaulting me to the point where they had to call a code. And now I'm thinking, did they send him in there to get me? Well,
I'll let people draw their own conclusion with that, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me. I mean, how easy is it for them to offer somebody, a few extra meal trays or some cigarettes or another favor or two to get them to do whatever they want?
Absolutely. Shortly after that, another 2 days, he actually left segregation and walked out of the jail. And then the CO came forth here, the anonymous source, saying there was talks about how they were going to, pay inmates to attack me, and when I was in the shower, they were going to black out the camera and really try and get me. So thankfully I'm out. Thanks to my parents for getting me out. And like I said, thanks to all those who wrote into the jail, to the warden, for acknowledging my existence, because if I didn't have a family or there was no voice backing me like Mr. Taylor, who knows what could have happened.
Yeah, and who knows what's happened to so many other people that, didn't have the benefit of a Sean Turzanski nearby to tell their story. I mean,
Absolutely.
There's no way of knowing how often this happens, and I'm afraid to think that I suspect this happens quite regularly, and in many different jails. So we need to send a strong message about this.
Absolutely.
So, I really appreciate your time, Sean,
Thanks for having me.
and your courage to come forward with this. Let's stay in touch. If there's more developments, certainly going to want to hear about it, and we're going to follow this case very carefully.
Great. Thanks again for everything.
Okay, well, thank you again, and we'll definitely be in touch with you.